Yes, people, what's happening? Welcome back to the channel. In this video, we're going to be looking at all about carbohydrates, carbs, as a type 1 diabetic. Now, if you're new here, consider hitting a thumbs up if you get value from this video. Also, consider subscribing. If you've been following along my videos on my content for a while, thank you very much. I much appreciate you. So I've broken this video down into a few sections, and the goal here is to obviously educate you a little bit, to give you some informed, kind of non-biased opinions from both ends of the spectrum, so you can then go and make your own decisions based on knowledge, not just based on who another bloody type one said they eat a lot of carbs or they eat low carb and the bloods are amazing and they try and push it on you. It's not about that. It's not about me trying to push things on you. It's about me educating you, giving you knowledge so you can make an informed decision on what you think is going to be best for you. So I've broken it down into a few sections. We're going to be looking at carbohydrates' role in the body, what they actually do, what's considered a low, moderate, and high carb diet, what type of people may benefit from each of these different carbs amounts, why a lot of type 1s or some type 1s choose to cut them out, the other variables that we need to consider as type 1s if cutting out carbs, and also a big topic, weight loss and carbohydrates. So let's look at carbs role in the body and what they actually do. So carbohydrates are our preferred source of energy. Now, some people may start arguing against me in this video and not agreeing with me. That's absolutely fine. This is the world of social media. Everyone's entitled to their own opinion. But our body's preferred source of energy is carbohydrates. And this just doesn't go for energy in our muscles. This is our organs, our brain. Everything in our body prefers to run off glucose, right? Now, that being said, there's only two out of the three macronutrients, which are carbs, fats, and proteins, that we actually need to live. Else, if we don't have, we will die. And that's fats and protein. We can actually live without carbohydrates. If you're on a low carb or a keto diet watching this, you'll know that. We can actually live without carbohydrates. But our body does prefer to use carbs, which is converted into glucose, which we'll go over into a second, as energy. It prefers to use that than using anything else like protein or fats. Now, basically, a little bit of a science lesson, not that sciencey. You probably know this if you're a type 1. When we eat carbs, short and sweet, it's converted into glucose and then it's put into obviously our bloodstream and to get from our bloodstream through the cells into things like our brain, our organs, our muscles. Insulin's like a key that unlocks that door. Now, obviously, our job as type 1 diabetic is making sure that we're having enough or we're matching the insulin with the glucose that's in our blood to let it through. Obviously, we get that wrong. We can go high, meaning there's too much glucose left in our blood. Or if there's too much insulin there and not enough glucose, we end up with low blood sugar. And this is why a lot of type 1s can kind of fear carbohydrates, which we'll get on to a second. So that's a quick overview of, carbs role in the body. Now, what is considered low, sort of moderate, high carbs? Now, this is a bit of personal preference, well, personal bias, I suppose, a little bit from working with over 1,000 type 1s. And I myself have eaten various different ways over the past 18, 19 years of being a type 1 diabetic. I've tried low carb, high carb, moderate. And as I say, I'm not going to try and push my personal opinion on you, but I am going to tell you what we found from working with over 1,000 other type 1s. So I think a low carb diet would be anything under 100 grams would be considered low carb. We've then got keto and stuff like that. A side note on that, as a type 1 diabetic, to go into true ketosis is actually really challenging because if we have a hypo, you're not going to treat that with a fucking peanut, are you, at the end of the day? Like, you're going to treat that with glucose, thus being a high probability that you're going to knock yourself out of that ketosis. But that could be a whole video in itself. Anyway, low carb, generally anything under 100 grams, maybe consider low carb. Moderate, I'd say anything from 100 to maybe 250 grams a day. This is, 100 to 250. And high carbs, anything over 250, 3, 4, 5, 600, that sort of stuff. Yeah. So that would be the sort of what would be low, what would be moderate, what would be sort of high. Now, what type of people or type 1s may benefit from each of these, like low, moderate, high? The best thing to do for yourself is to try eating different ways. Try eating a low carb diet for maybe a week, a moderate carb, a higher carb. It would be variable, person dependent on what is moderate and high. I'd say low is pretty much the same across the board. But that's going to give you a good insight as to what your body works best at, right? Because be totally honest, some people do. We're taking bloods, managing bloods out of it. Some people's body respond better to lower carbs, some respond better to keeping carbs in or higher carbs. Yeah. There's a few factors which we'll get into now that may indicate that. So, who would a lower carb diet potentially be better for? We're not going to look at this in terms of managing bloods, right? We'll get onto that shortly. Yeah, when we look at why some type ones might choose to cut them out or why a lot do. So, low carb diet, who might it be better for? Someone that's not very active or someone that is potentially overweight. Now, why do I say this? Well, carbs are an energy source. Yes, our brain needs them and obviously our muscles and stuff like that. But if we're not very active, we might respond better or be better eating a lower carb diet because we don't necessarily need the energy that quickly, right? Also, someone who is potentially overweight. Now, look, if we're overweight, it does inhibit our insulin sensitivity, thus meaning it can be more challenging to control our bloods. You notice if you've ever lost body fat, chances are you're going to need less insulin or your insulin sensitivity is up and you absorb carbohydrates and stuff like that better than obviously when you was a little bit heavier, say. So someone that could benefit from a lower carb diet might be someone who has a desk job, doesn't really exercise. I don't know why you wouldn't exercise, but maybe you can't. Doesn't really exercise, those sort of people. Who may benefit from a moderate carb diet? So thus anything up to maybe 250 grams, 100 to 250 grams. This is person dependent as well. I'd say the person who is doing a little bit of exercise, maybe it's an aerobic session a week, like running, cycling, classes at the gym, strength training, that sort of stuff. We might potentially then, keep that. Like I say, you're gonna have to test this as well. It's a bit of trial and error. But these sort of people might benefit from a more moderate sort of carbohydrate diet. And a high carb diet would be, I can use myself an example for this. I'm a triathlete. I do a lot of endurance sport, sometimes for up to 2 to 6 hours a day. Some of my bike rides might be 5 or 6 hours. I burn through a lot of glucose. Yeah. So anyone like myself, endurance athletes, we will potentially benefit. Well, we will benefit from a higher carbohydrate diet. Yeah. It's not like if I'm out on the bike and I need some energy, I'm gonna eat like a fucking Brazil nut or something like that. It's not gonna have the same response. It's not gonna be in my body to give me energy quick enough. And that's one thing about carbohydrates. We will look at the other variables in a sec because we can get energy from obviously protein and fats, but it doesn't come to us as quick as carbohydrates do. That's why I'm speaking about high carb diet. For endurance athletes, we need that energy quickly, or someone who's super active day job, that sort of always moving around, tradesmen, that sort of stuff. We want the energy quite quickly, thus meaning we might be more suited or we will be more suited for a higher carbohydrate sort of diet. So this is, some people will fall out. This is just a rough guideline. Some people might fall out of this as well, but that's looking at what sort of person might benefit from low, moderate, higher sort of carbs. So if our body's preferred source of energy is carbohydrates and glucose, and we cut those out, what does our body then need to do? Well, our body's very clever. What it will then do is actually look for energy from fats and from protein. So it can actually convert these into glucose in the absence of carbs. Yeah. So this isn't our body's preferred way, but if we do cut the carbs out, it will find the energy from somewhere. Yeah. This could be a whole video in itself. But if anyone's wondering, well, if our body likes, glucose preferred source of energy and we cut those out, what's going to happen? It will get the energy from somewhere. It's just not as sort of readily or quickly available. As I said about the example of myself in a triathlon, for example, if I need energy, I'm not going to have a bag of nuts if I need it in the here and now. Or same if we're dropping low, I'm going to have carbs, sugary carbs, because I want that energy quickly. So it's faster absorbed. So the big question and a very common thing is why do a lot of type 1 diabetics choose to cut carbohydrates out or eat a lower carb diet? Speaking about what we spoke about before, when we eat carbohydrates, it's converted into glucose. We need to get our insulin right. Now, a lot of type 1s then believe, well, if I take that variable of carbohydrates out, my bloods are going to be easier to manage. And this then brings us on to the other variable, if you are cutting out carbs, is your protein and fats are likely going to be, well, predominantly fats, are going to be increased. Thus, so you get enough calories in each day. If you cut carbohydrates out, you cut your fats right down, you eat a moderate type protein, like that's not a good recipe. That's a recipe for disaster, right? So if we are dropping our carbohydrates down, we need to increase our fats. Now, when we increase fats and we take carbs down and we keep protein usually stays the same across the board. What tends to happen is we might need more background insulin because we've not got as much rapid acting insulin moving through. So there's a high probability that we're going to have to increase our background insulin. Then we need to look at how we would then actually bolus or giving the insulin in the correct sort of way for these foods that we are now eating. So, like, let's say it's steak, avocado, some salad, we've cut the potatoes, cut the rice out. Chances are, if we're using pens, we're going to have to split that bolus up, or if we're using a pump, we're going to have to use the extended bolus feature because it's a very high protein, high fat meal. Thus, this can also be just as tricky as eating a moderate carb meal with lower fats and moderate protein. Yeah. So, as with most of type 1 diabetes, if we cut or change one variable, we do impact another. Yeah. So then it will be like pick your poison, basically. Do you want to keep carbs in and sometimes make it easier to bolus? Or it can also be a little bit challenging. Or do you want to cut them out and have to use a split or extended bolus? Now, look, I will dial it back to this. Like, we just need to learn to bolus for how we choose to eat. We shouldn't change how we want to eat to try and manage our blood sugar levels. And taking a non-biased opinion, this is the only push I will put on people. If you are cutting out carbs just to try and manage your blood sugar levels, but you really enjoy carbs, like myself, I love Reese, I love chips, love rice potatoes. I need them with being an endurance athlete. But most of the point, it's not about me, it's about you. If you choose to do that, then what you're doing is suppressing sort of you learning the skill to bolus correctly for carbohydrates. And then guaranteed there'll come a point where you're going to eat carbs. And because your body's not used to it or you're not used to bolusing, you're probably going to have a complete shit show and go sky high and be like, oh, this is why I never eat carbs. When really it's not the carbs, it's the fact that you've not learned to bolus for it. That's one argument that we could argue for. The other argument is if you choose to go low carb and you actually enjoy it, and as a sideline of that, you find managing your bloods simpler and easier. But the first and foremost thing is you enjoy it. You want to eat that way. You feel better eating that way. Then go for it. We have a good split of clients across the board on our program. Some go moderate, high carb, some like low carb. And we always ask them, were you doing this to try and manage your bloods or do you like eating that way? I like eating that way. Cool, let's keep that in, but I do want to teach you how to manage your bloods around it as well. So then if we are ever thrown a period in time where we're going to eat a lot of carbs, we know how to manage it. Yeah. Now, another sort of elephant in the room in the type 1 community is weight loss and carbohydrates. Now, I will say this straight to the point. Like, carbohydrates do not make us fat. What makes us fat is overeating on too many calories. We could cut carbs right down to, let's say, 10 grams because they get zeros pretty hard. Yeah. We could cut carbs right down to, let's say, 10 grams. And we could eat a lot of fat and a lot of protein. And if we're over our total daily calories that our body can eat to maintain weight, so we're in a calorie surplus, we will still gain weight, even though we've dropped carbs down. Likewise, we could drop fats right down, increase carbs, relatively high, keep protein in there. But if we're in a calorie deficit, we will still lose weight. So it's overall calories that make the difference in terms of what happens to our weight, whether we lose weight, we stay the same, or we gain weight. The thing is, when we eat carbohydrates, they hold water. We make our body hold water. Thus, when a lot of type 1s, people in general, humans in general, cut carbs out, for the first few days, it seems like they've lost a lot of weight because they've cut carbs out and they start losing water. And they're like, oh my God, it was the carbs. Well, it wasn't the carbs, you're just losing some water. Yeah. So understand that weight loss comes down to calories, not a single macronutrient. So it's not carbs, fats, or proteins. Yeah. And as I've been on about all throughout this video, it's person dependent on who might prefer to eat more carbs, low carb, moderate carb, high carb. That comes down to the individual. But as I said at the start, test this. Do a week of low carbs. See how you feel. Week of moderate, week of higher carbs. See how you feel. Find what's good for you. There's one thing that I will say as well, and this does frustrate me as a coach. Look, I'm a coach. I could probably say things and, lead people in certain directions. I hate the word influencer, so I'm not going to bloody use that, but I could lead people in certain directions. I will never, ever push my personal biased opinion on people. I eat a lot of carbohydrates in the realm of maybe 300 to 600 grams a day. I would then never go and push that on someone because I find it's what works best for me. Still manage my bloods the same. We've got clients who do the same. I will never push that on anyone. One frustrating thing, we don't really get this from people that eat a high carb diet, but much more so that people who eat lower carb, is they'll do it and they'll gain some success with whether that's managing the bloods, losing weight, how they're feeling. And then they go and preach that to other people. This is the best way. This is amazing. You need to cut carbs out. You need to do this. Look, don't be a knob. Don't do that just because you found something that works for you. As I said at the start, people need to try their own things and find their own way. In this video, I'm just trying to educate people so you can go and try different things. You've got the education, you understand what you're doing, and then go and implement it and try it. Just because something worked for you, don't go and push that and preach that on other people. It's highly frustrating and it's just not a nice thing to do. Yeah. So that brings us to the end of this video. Again, if you got value, consider hitting the thumbs up, subscribing to the channel. And if you do choose to change the amount of carbohydrates that you're eating, feel free to drop me a message. Let me know how you get on. See you in the next video.